There's a moment every leader faces, usually quietly where the setup looks right, but the outcome never comes. I had one of those moments this week. I got knocked out of my fantasy football playoffs. Why? Because I decided to start Justin Jefferson. And before anyone starts breaking down the matchup was there. The opportunity was there. Everything you'd point to on paper said, this should work. But what wasn't there was production, not this year. And instead of asking myself what was likely, I trusted what used to be true. A familiar name, a legacy producer, someone that I'd seen deliver before. And I'd assumed that reputation still meant reliability. It didn't. And that's when it clicked. This isn't about fantasy football. This is about what happens in business when leaders keep betting on what looks right instead of reassessing what's actually working. Because familiarity is seductive, legacy feels safe, and trusting the past is far easier than confronting the signals that are right in front of you. Today's episode is about why the mistake keeps repeating in sales and leadership and recruiting, and why the longer you delay reassessment, the more expensive it becomes. Welcome back to Eyes Wide. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you so much for being a part of this journey. I've got my trusted companion here getting ripped. This, again, is going to be a solo mission, so I'll keep this one short. We're going to put about 30 minutes on the clock, and my goal is to deliver right on time, to not ask any of you to spend more time than you need to with this bi-weekly version of Eyes Wide, the podcast. So I'm recording this episode on Christmas Eve morning, and I had the opportunity this morning. I figured I'd make sure that I am preaching, or I'm practicing what I preach with regard to seizing opportunity when it knocks. And I was given the opportunity to be a guest on a wildly successful podcast this morning, bright and early. My check-in time was right around 6 a.m. local California time. And so I was with David Meltzer. The podcast is called Office Hours. And, I was thinking to myself, do I really want to do this Christmas Eve morning? And then I thought for about 2 more seconds, and I said, of course, I want to take any opportunity that I have to start to get my messaging out to the world and start to kind of share the gospel that is this podcast. So thank you for all of those of you who have been checking this out on a regular basis. I hope you're getting something out of it. And in this podcast, it was a live episode, and most of their episodes are recorded live, and I really enjoyed it. I love the fact that they just picked up and went. It didn't really matter. They weren't looking to make anything too polished or too perfect. They just wanted to have some authentic conversations with some guests that they're bringing on that are doing some interesting things in the world. And so I really enjoyed the hell out of it. It was a quick spot, in and out, but it was a hell of an experience. And I figured what better thing to do with regard to getting myself all set up and ready to rock and roll for this podcast was to be able to record one of my own. So this is going to be episode 19. You heard the opening. This was inspired by fantasy football. And I think I've mentioned on some of previous episodes that I'm a part of one league, only one league this year, because it does take a lot of time. But the idea of fantasy football, some of you may be really into it. Some of you may think it's a terrible waste of time, and you're not wrong. But the truth of the matter is it brings in a lot of concepts of business, of measuring data, looking at the big picture, looking at your competition, looking at what the matchups are for your players, and just kind of assessing what's your best probability or how to increase the likelihood of a positive outcome. And that's really what it's all about. You have players that you're really high on, you have others that are on the bench, and you have to mix and match, deciding on how that week presents, what makes sense for your team and how you want to show up for that week. And so I find it very interesting. It doesn't always work out the way some people would say that there's way too much luck involved with it. And I would argue back that, well, success in business and life there's a certain element of luck there as well. I don't think any of us get to these crazy levels of success without experiencing some kind of luck, or if it's not luck, at least pulling out a win in the last 20 seconds of a game, I think is the differentiation between someone that is almost there and someone that truly has become a champion, or someone that truly is able to say that they have marked success. So let's talk about this idea of opportunity versus probability. And as I mentioned in the opening, I was knocked out. I wasn't knocked out this previous week. I was knocked out the week prior. And Justin Jefferson has been terrible all year long. Not him, so to speak. He hasn't had a good quarterback. So even though he's really talented, he hasn't been put in a position where he had an opportunity to be successful. And fantasy football, business, life, it's about the matchups you're given, right? It's about what presents in front of you, and then how are you able to kind of navigate however the course is set up. And with this particular week, it was the first week of the playoffs, so it's lose and go home. And that's the real kind of transition or the translation into the business world, because a lot of us, if we're lucky enough, we get involved with organizations or opportunities where what we do with that opportunity truly matters. And having to experience failure or loss is something that's real. And knowing that if you don't deliver in this particular week, at this particular opportunity, you're going to be sent to packing. You're going to be gone. And so the stakes get higher and decisions become that much more important. And so you take this idea of Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, for anyone who potentially doesn't follow football or the NFL, even those that just passively watch the NFL from the side probably know Justin Jefferson. He's one of the elites in the league, top 3, maybe even the best receiver in the league. He's someone that when you're starting to recruit players for your team, you're in your draft, he's someone that you're going to draft probably in your first top 5 picks. And the reason being is because year after year after year, he's showed up and delivered. And I started thinking about this, especially with regard to bringing people over to an organization to help model their behavior, their success upon others. So for those of you listening, some of you will be looking to build a sales leadership team. And we can get into, there's so many different levels of what we're about to talk about. It can be applied to the rep level. It could be applied to the sales manager level. It can even be applied to the CEO level. And what we're talking about is people that are currently successful in whatever role, in whatever environment they are in. And when it comes time to wanting to recruit people over, and so I had an opportunity to not only build a sales team, but also build a sales leadership team. And so I was looking for individuals that I knew were successful and would have a high likelihood of being able to express what it is, their behaviors, or model their behaviors upon others, so that we can build an entire team of successful reps. And so I recruited over someone that I consider to be one of the best sales reps I've ever known. I've known this individual for a very long time. I got them onto our team, and I gave him an awful lot of responsibility really quickly. And as we started to mature as an organization and we were moving really fast, the stakes were extraordinarily high. We did not have a long runway. We did not have a lot of mess around time, if you will. What we did every single day mattered. How we either grew or didn't grow each day had ramifications. And I originally had 2 people that I put into the role of a sales leader. Someone on the East Coast, someone on the West Coast. And it was amazing watching these paths diverge. Someone that was truly in the wings, waiting, curious, open to ideas, smart, understood the business, understood what we needed to accomplish in order to achieve our total goals, but ultimately open to the idea of learning and embracing the vision and the messaging of what we were putting into place. Versus the other sales leader, again, one of the best natural salespeople I've ever likely known in my life. But when it came to actually having the vision to be able to build something, to grow, to give people coaching and direction on how to develop a market, I started seeing real shortcomings. And I started getting really concerned early on, but I kind of just kept going with it because I thought very highly of this individual. I recruited them over from a good job, so I felt responsible, but I continued to watch this individual flounder. I continued to watch this individual struggle, and it would become readily apparent. I'm big on having weekly calls where we discuss metrics and we discuss growth of those metrics to really be able to gauge if we're able to stack wins week after week after week. And I would notice that this individual, and even as the sales leadership team grew from 2 to 4 to 6, and then ultimately I think we ended around 7 sales leaders across the US, this person who had been there since the very start still was having a difficulty grasping the concept of these weekly calls. And I could tell that what was being expressed on these weekly calls meant that individual, first of all, didn't fully buy in to the approach of the business, which is difficult when it comes to sales leadership if you're not bought into the vision of the organization. But 2, I could start to see that there was a difficulty in having the capacity to grasp the speed at which things were moving and the why as to why we were focusing on these particular metrics and these particular growth initiatives. And so it became a really difficult scenario where I had to figure out ways to mitigate this person's lack of effectiveness. I didn't want to fully remove them from the role, even though I did receive an awful lot of pressure and suggestion to get this person out of the role. But I wanted to be able to help. I wanted to be able to fix, and it turned into me making a mistake because I thought that I could continue to fix someone that I at one point deemed to be an elite producer. And I wanted to keep putting that square peg into this round hole, even though I knew all of the data and everything was stacked well against them in order to be successful. I still believed in this legacy producer, and it can be blinding. The same can be said for a board. Right? A board is responsible when there's going to be a leadership change. They're looking to make a hire that's going to elevate an organization into different levels, bring them into the next level of success for that organization. You have some sales leaders or some company leaders that are built to take a company to, say, $50 million. And then there's other individuals that are considered better suited to take a company from $50 million to $500 million. And then there's others beyond that. And so the board is trying to make the best decision on who should come in here and be able to elevate this organization. And oftentimes you want to start looking at, well, what's on paper? What's the pedigree? What have they done in the past? And truthfully, that is why having solid interviews and making sure that you know the questions that you want to ask, what you're trying to actually tease out and understand from an individual matters so much more than what's likely on paper. People get dazzled by the shiny objects. People get dazzled by having a really good resume. They may have gone to an exclusive graduate school and had a really exclusive MBA on their tagline, or they were tied to an organization that at one point went public or at one point was sold, and it was considered a successful exit. And so if you just hire on the legacy performance, sometimes you're left a little bit underwhelmed, because what you start to realize is there's a chance that individual who happened to be there at the time of experienced success may have not had a lot to do with the success. It may have had a lot more to happen with circumstance, a lot more to happen with who had built things previously or who had put some things into motion prior to that individual getting there. And so it becomes a difficult task. So it's never easy to just bring someone in who is performing in a certain role and then assume that they're going to do those same great things, or that company is going to experience the same great things in this new environment. And so we just need to be often careful about making sure that we have things in place, or we are going through the due diligence and the process to truly determine who's going to be effective in this particular role, in this specific experience. And that's why you can't have one size fits all interview questions when you're trying to bring someone over, whether it is in a rep role, whether it is in a sales leadership role, or whether it is in an ultimate corporate leadership role. And I mentioned that this can be applied also to the sales rep level. And if you are responsible for building a sales team, especially if you're responsible for building a sales team from scratch and you have to do it quickly, you know that you need to get people out in the field. You know that you need to get good people out in the field. And we all want this idea of an A player, right? We all heard of A players. We want an entire organization of A players. Of course, it makes sense. Those A players are typically wildly successful in their current situations and their current gigs. And what that means in the sales world, especially in the med tech sales world, if you are considered successful, you're likely making an awful lot of money. You're selling a lot of your product, and your commissions are really high. And when it comes time to being recruited, you're going to say, well, I'm making this amount of money here because I am the best and I'm wildly successful, and I want to be guaranteed to make that amount of money at your organization. And for people that don't truly understand how important it is to have the ability to navigate who and what personality traits are going to be applicable and be considered favorable to show success in the new role that you're recruiting for, you're just going to go after the shiny things. You're going to say, well, that person is generating $1 million in revenue, or that person has a $5 million territory. That person has a $2.5 million territory. So we need them to come over because they have great relationships, and we want them to do that here. And more times than not, when you recruit those A players over, you are bringing in as many Justin Jeffersons as you possibly can, because if you have an entire organization built on Justin Jeffersons, then you are going to take that organization to the moon. Nothing's stopping you. And the truth of the matter is, if you bring in a bunch of Justin Jeffersons to your organization that are really expensive, and you don't have the right quarterback in place, that you don't have the right coach in place, that you don't have the right individual that's going to draw up the plans and ensure that those plans are being executed as designed, it doesn't matter how talented that rep is, how talented that wide receiver is, they will not get the ball and they will not score touchdowns, and your team, your business will not win. I talk often about when constructing a sales team, it's important to actually build it like an NFL team. You cannot build an entire organization of wide receivers, an organization of quarterbacks, entire organization of veterans, rookies, you name it. You need to have a mix. You need to have diversity, because people need to have the ability to learn from one another. You do need to have the veterans, what I call like the pillars, the tent poles in the organization, those that likely have the relationships, able to show the ropes to some of the younger individuals, the power of a relationship, the power of having a captivating conversation. But a lot of times the veterans, they are rather set in their ways. They've been doing it for a while. They've been successful. They know how to do a job, or they know the way that they like to do their job. And it becomes difficult to pivot sometimes, or to have a very seasoned veteran carry out some kind of new, innovative way of doing business. More than likely, it's not going to happen. You're going to get friction. You're going to get pushback. And there are two kinds of friction. We talk about this. But likely, if you had an entire team of people that were reluctant to trying new, innovative ideas, you're going to get a lot of that negative friction. And that is not going to be good for business. So you have your tentpole individuals in the organization, but you also need to have your role players, your people that are going to be able to just deliver, that you can count on, that are going to be able to carry out messaging. You know they're going to execute. And then you also need your mixture of rookies, people that are very green, but full of energy and enthusiasm and curiosity, because those are the people that you're going to be relying on. If you can grow that segment of your sales force and you already have those intangibles, people that have just an openness and an enthusiasm to not stop, to never quit. Once you arm them with some of the veteran experience and you arm them with some of the teachings and the learnings they can do as far as kind of perfecting the craft of sales and market development building, well, you're going to have an extraordinary individual or group of individuals where that's what's going to propel your organization the fastest, lifting that ground level, that rookie level. That's where the magic really happens. And so you see how this idea of just bringing in legacy people, it's not going to get it done. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to be mindful of the time. I want to keep this as light and interesting as possible. I got a little bit more coffee left. Well, let's talk about the customer, applying this principle to customers. Some may say that this kind of idea of shiny things, legacy, legacy performance, helping to dictate future outcomes, can truly be applied to the customer, even more specifically that buddy customer. And we all have them. It's that individual that we know can be a rock star, can be a monster producer of revenue for an organization. They represent a lot of business. And those special customers likely receive a lot of special attention. And so depending on the industry you're in, maybe they're attending more of your sales events. Maybe they're getting more speaking opportunities. Maybe they are involved in clinical research. Whatever it is, that individual or those individuals are given the keys to the kingdom. They're given everything an organization or a sales representative have in their armamentarium to be able to perpetuate and produce sales. And so if you're not careful, you can get into this rut where you're constantly including this individual or these individuals in your forecasting, in your business makeup. If this person is able to deliver this, then I will be successful. And I see it time and time and time again, this false security that this individual who represents an awful lot of business opportunity is finally going to deliver in this month, in this quarter. This is the one. I know I've been talking about it for a while, but this is the one where this person is going to step up and finally deliver after all the work and all the attention and all the focus and all the opportunity that we put into this individual, this a customer. This is the month or this is the quarter that they are finally going to deliver their part of the bargain. And this is a monster watch out. This is one of those things that I talk about. Find your tomorrow in today. Find your tomorrow in today. Stop talking about what is going to happen in the future. Focus on what you can control now to change the trajectory of your path in the future. This idea of a buddy customer, where you think access is just automatically going to meet or equal opportunity, this can be a real dud. And this is also why you can fall into the trap of bringing over these A-list reps who have relationships with this A-list customer, and you think it's just going to be this automatic release and result of business and success. And I'm here to tell you that unfortunately, more times than not, it doesn't happen that way. I oftentimes talk about this idea, this concept that it's more difficult to sell to your friend customers than it is complete strangers. Because you don't want to go through the same approach with a friend. Everything becomes more of, can you do me a favor? Or, hey, if you wouldn't mind, versus figuring out ways to truly add value to an individual, to solve problems. Oftentimes we don't do that with our quote unquote friend customers. And it's a real shame. And that's why I talk about over and over and over again. Don't just rely on this Justin Jefferson that used to score a lot of touchdowns and he is going to be what you build your season on or your business on. It doesn't work like that. You'll be much better suited trying to figure out who you can turn into the next Justin Jefferson. That's the approach you want to take. Whether you are the sales rep or you are the sales leader, it doesn't matter. Spend your efforts and your time trying to build new rock stars, new A customers, new people that are going to become shiny objects. The more people that you can grow from the ground up to be able to become what we all consider the elite, the more successful you're going to be in your role, and the more successful ultimately the organization you represent is going to become. So ultimately, this is what it all comes down to. This was not about comfort, and it wasn't about effort. It was about being seduced by things that used to work. A legacy player, a familiar leader, a friendly customer, a perceived A player, and assuming that past value still guaranteed future yield. That is the real danger in leadership. Not fear, not laziness, but failing to reassess assets when the signals change. Markets don't reward history. They reward execution. And leaders don't get paid to protect what was. They get paid to decide what still matters. Now, if you're still with me, I want to thank you so much for checking out this episode of Eyes Wide. I'm going to go ahead and close this the way I close every episode. Again, I wish this was live because I'd love to be able to say this with you. But remember, this life is what you make of it. The future you is waiting patiently to meet the current you. Continue to work to find your tomorrow in today and fight like hell to keep the promises you make to yourself. Until we meet again, eyes wide. See everything. Goodbye.